That's right here. It's true. They provide this group, and here's the website. Oh, reading favorite.
Hello, could we take our seats, please? Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the February 7th, 2025 Transportation Committee meeting. First, I'd like to ask our interpreter to explain how to access interpretation services. Please go ahead.
Announcement from interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on Mute Original Audio to not hear the original Spanish logo in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. Tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples, who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States. From 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay, Degeno, the Luswego, the Capeño, and the Cahuilla, this land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Francesca, can you please confirm a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum. Currently absent are the County of San Diego and North County Inland.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 1, we will now do non-agenda public and member comments. For today's meeting, based upon the amount of items and the time available, we will in general do 2 minutes per item. I will note that I do intend to pull item number 3 off of consent. So the one exception will be the remaining thing on consent will be the approval of the meeting minutes only on consent. So that item will only have 1 minute. Francesca, please go ahead with public comments.
Thank you, Chair. We have 1 non-agenda public comment. Jim Cousteau, if you'd like to step up to the podium.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Cousteau, and I'm a member of the Spring Valley Community Planning Group and also represent my planning group on the Association of Planning Groups. And I've been appointed by the Association of Planning Groups to join this esteemed committee, I think, beginning next month, if I'm not mistaken. And just tell you briefly about myself, San Diego native, grew up in Lemon Grove, went to Grossmont College, San Diego State, taught 38 years, retired from Cuyamaca College as a professor emeritus, where I taught automotive technology. So I'm very well versed in electric cars and emission controls, and I'm very interested in transportation. I just left a meeting where I serve on the Traffic Advisory Committee for the County of San Diego. So I look forward to sharing my insights and my history and our particular interests in the unincorporated area. I reside in East Spring Valley, Rancho San Diego, and we have some challenging roadway concerns that we need to have addressed that still haven't been taken care of. You're probably well aware of the Highway 94 Spring Street interchange. I'm concerned that as we move forward with the new entrance into into the country at Otay Mesa and possible elimination of the toll on the 125, that's only going to create additional pressure on that roadway. The next roadway that's a challenge is the 52, 125, where there's a reduction from multiple lanes down to 2 lanes heading westbound. Also, our in East County and North County rural areas, the fire evacuation routes are a big issue that needs to be addressed. We've seen what happened in the Paradise Fire several years ago where many people.
Thanks so much. Your time has expired. And that concludes the public commenters.
Thank you, and thanks for introducing yourself. Looking forward to hearing more from you. With that, are there any committee member non-agenda comments? Seeing none, we will then go ahead and move on to the consent. As I stated, I would like to pull item 3, so we will just be, oh, sorry, Mario's update. Yes, go ahead, Mario. You should wave faster, harder at me, Mario.
No. Well, thank you. First of all, good afternoon. And as a group, we would like to really congratulate a local San Diegan, Clarissa Falcon. She has been selected as vice chair for the California Transportation Commission. That's a big deal for those who know. The CTC is basically where most of our funding comes through. So it's great to have a San Diegan being the vice chair of the CTC. This week with Chairwoman Hibner, we visited Sacramento and accompanied the San Diego Chamber on the legislative delegation. We have some pretty good meetings and discussed several projects, several issues from housing, from vehicles mile travels, from emergency evacuation routes for the 67. It was a very robust and holistic discussion. For those who have been through the hallways today, you could see a lot of blue bins. Today it feels like it's the last day of school because today is the last day that SANDAG employees will be working in their offices. Then they will be going remote for almost a month. While we will still be having public meetings here, our employees will be only coming to the office when we have public meetings. So today is their last day. So we have a lot of bins in the hallways and a lot of old pictures that have come out and good pieces of history that we got to see. Also, want to congratulate MTS putting out the 910 Overnight Express. I hope you're getting a lot of ridership and the word's being passed on there. We have also a planning team kicked off the Rapid 277 public meetings and outreach. So that's ongoing. And I think it's open for the public to be commenting. Yeah. We did sign the, I don't think we have mentioned to TC, but we did execute the federal agreement with Customs and Border Protection and General Service Administration on the Otay Mesa East project. And the project is pursuing to 65% design. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mario. Glad we got to that. Good stuff. I also wanted to make one additional note that all of us should have received an email yesterday from Francesca about filling out information about conflicts of interest. It's all up to us, those of us who are on the boards, to make sure we're staying on top of our conflicts of interest. And But staff is here to help out. So if we provide the information to staff, they will try to make sure that anything is appropriately disclosed or people recuse themselves if necessary. And it's a good thing to do because the consequences for not paying attention to the conflicts of interest rules are pretty dire. So I would encourage people to fill that information out. With that, we will now go ahead and move on to consent, and the only thing on consent is the minutes. And so I will just go straight to public speakers and remind you there's only 1 minute.
We don't have any public comments on this item.
Does any board member have comment on consent? Seeing none, I'd entertain a move. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Thank you. I just noticed something that looked a little strange to me, and maybe it's just because of the time of the year, but I know, so I wasn't able to attend. I was in DC, I think at the U.S. Conference of Mayors or something somewhere, but so I called in and said, hey, I can't attend this committee, and it looks like it says that the alternate was a vacant seat. I was just going to mention quickly if whenever, in general for SANDAG, if an alternate is no longer part of a primary's, appointment, maybe let them know so that they know. I probably couldn't have done anything about that, but I didn't know that there wasn't an alternate. And actually, I reached out and said, please contact the alternate to attend. And they said, okay, thank you. So just a quick comment.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Agree with that. Is anyone willing to move consent? Moved by Edson, second by Duncan. I will make one quick comment as well, that I got an update from staff. I don't know that it's happened at this committee, but at the audit committee and the board, there's been discussion about what should be in the minutes. And I got an update from staff today that says that upon direction from Chair Huebner, the minutes will still just reflect an action agenda, but what staff is working on and should be rolled out by sometime in this summer, around June or July, is that the minutes and the agenda items and the video will all be interlinked. So you'll be able to click on agenda item and that'll take you right to the point of the video where that agenda item or the minutes, click from there, is discussed. So hopefully that'll help mitigate some of the concern about understanding what was said at a meeting. But that's what I've been informed is the current plan so far. Anything else? Okay. With that, I'll call for the vote. For anybody that's new, 1 means yes, 2 means no, and 3 means abstain.
Chair, for the record, I did not attend that meeting. I am voting on this. I did read the minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Hudson. Are we waiting on anyone? Oh, there we go.
That motion passes unanimously with those members that are present.
Great, thanks. And with that, we'll move on to item number 3. And I had a couple of specific things that I was kind of curious about on this item, specifically noticing in the staff report, our Transnet revenues will be projected to be about 13 million short this year, and we only have 1 quarter left. And I'm curious what we might be doing about that, as well as I'm assuming our revenues at this point are all based upon getting all the grant funding from the federal government, and if we are, how we're working that given the mess that seems to be going on with respect to federal disbursement of funds at this point. So, but feel free to show other parts of the item that are appropriate. Thanks.
Sure. I'll go ahead and start on that. My name is Michelle Smith. I'm the manager of financial programming here at SANDAG. So the 14 million is across all programs. So it does touch each program a little bit. So even though it does seem like a large number, each program is getting hit a little bit differently based on the percentages. For our major corridors program, we do have balances that we can tap into for this fiscal year. And so those projects will continue to move forward. Some other ones are the BRT rail operations. So for that bucket of money, we did have a balance carrying over in the beginning, and now we're starting to draw down on that balance. And so there is sufficient balance for this fiscal year for that as well. Transit system improvements and the local system improvements, those are particular to the transit agencies and the locals. For the locals, that is a decrease of about 4 million. If you spread that across everybody, the biggest hit is going to be the county. So they're going to lose about $1 million. Everybody else is kind of anywhere from $1,000 up to $700,000. So it's a big mix, and it is up to some of the other local agencies to see how they're going to address that shortfall in regards to those local funds. In regards to the federal grants, we are still just waiting for further direction. We are moving forward with business as usual. We can still draw down on the current grants that we have, and so we're still doing that. In regards to what's affecting our revenues, I'll leave that up to our economist, Naomi.
I want to add something, and this is nationwide. you get awarded a grant, and then when you're ready to what's called allocate or go and get the money, you need to have a federal funding agreement after you have been awarded the grant. We have pending several federal funding agreements for a couple $100 million. And we're waiting to see the guidance from DOT of where that's going. It's been a normal procedure. Normally, when you're ready to allocate, you just go execute the funding agreement because the grant was already awarded. Right now, DOT is somewhat in a pause, evaluating items. So I think all the agencies in the United States are waiting to see where we are, what's going to be the guidance and the next steps. So we're waiting right now and trying to get guidance from FDA and from federal highways, where it's the majority of our grants are coming from.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Naomi Young, Principal Economist. So just as a backdrop to why we made the adjustment to fiscal year 25 and then also looking forward. Overall, San Diego economy remains healthy. We see a stable job market, strong wage growth, and moderating inflation. So those are all really good signs. But one of the things that was quite unusual that emerged is that sales tax revenue actually decreased despite a strong, healthy economy. And so what we've seen is overall in San Diego, while I'm saying it's a stable economy, it has been slower growth than initially anticipated. We've seen that track through on our sales tax revenue. And then also we're seeing consumers starting to spend differently. So in other words, they're starting to favor items that are non-taxable, like eating out, rather than they're favoring groceries over eating out, where we've seen groceries have slower inflation, eating out have higher inflation. So that shift has resulted in impacting our taxable base. And that's also a reflection of uneven inflation in the economy. The good news is that longer term, we do actually expect sales tax to regain strength, but it's going to take a couple of years. We're forecasting it'll take a couple of years to get there. And it's also marked by increased variability and uncertainty. So to explain why we had to do a $14 million adjustment to the current fiscal year. So last year, we had anticipated fiscal year 24 to come in on par with fiscal year 23. So no gain, no loss. But what ended up happening is it came in lower than anticipated. So we had about a $3 million shortfall. For fiscal year 25, we had expected sales tax revenue to actually recover, but what we've seen is another year of decrease. And that's what's driven the 14 million adjustment. So it's 2 consecutive years of sales tax growth being weaker or negative. Looking forward, when you look at this bar, what you can see is that in the short run, meaning the next 5 years, that we've downgraded our expectations in sales tax growth below what we had expected last year. So the net effect is that in the short run, it's about $90 million lower. Good? Okay.
And then here was the an overall look at the difference that we're looking at for the next 5 years compared to what was approved back in 2024 at the board meeting. So in 2025, we see a decrease of 14 million and then a further decrease. And then up until 2028, we start to turn around and have a less of a decrease, starting to grow back to where we were starting in 2029. And then following, this is a chart that's in your report. So this is the TDA updated revenues for 2025. This shows the differences between the board approved estimates for 25 that were approved in 24, and then our updated revenues for 25. So for TDA, the total is about $4 million difference. It is not as drastic as it could be because we do have TDA reserves that we are using for this fiscal year. And then the next chart is the Transnet and how that is split up between the different programs.
Thank you. If that's all you have to present, I will go to public speakers at this point. Do we have any public speakers on this item?
No public comments.
Okay, great with that. I guess, and thanks for the presentation. Very nice to have that information update. I guess my first question is just interpreting what you, or hopefully interpreting what you said, Michelle, is that from the perspective of the remainder of this year, we don't expect to see anything that this committee or the board would care about be cut or dropped because of this revenue shortfall. Is that correct?
Correct. We're not looking to bring anything back to cutting
Okay.
project at this time.
And then based upon the future projections, are we going to be looking at an updated RTIP? Given the drop in revenue?
You'll have an update. The FY '26 budget will come forward, and then
Okay.
based on what's approved in the '26 budget, we'll come back with an RTIP update.
Okay, great, thanks. Do any other committee members have, Ms. Hudson?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. And that is that NCTD receives fundings from multiple sources, including TDA and Transnet. These funding sources fluctuate, as we've heard here today, and can cause a challenge when NCTD initiates its budgeting process. NCTD bases decisions about service levels on available funding from these sources. Service increases cannot be implemented without additional funding. So all the fun projects that we want to do, there's no money for. Right now, it's, making sure that we support the service, hopefully are able to support the service that we provide now.
Thank you for that. Any other member comments or questions? Otherwise, this is a recommend item. I'd entertain a motion to recommend to the board.
So move.
Moved by Edson, second by Mendoza. Please vote.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Great, thanks. We'll now move on to item number 4, which is the proposed 2025 legislative program, and Ryan Williams and Hannah Stern are to present.
Right. Good morning, good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Ryan Williams. I'm Government Relations handling the federal portfolio for SANDAG. Today, we are pleased to present you with SANDAG's 2025 legislative program. Consistent with Board Policy 1, the Transportation Committee is asked to recommend legislative program elements related to transit and transportation to the Board of Directors. You'll find a copy of the legislative program in your agenda packets with proposed revisions and tracked changes and items under the jurisdiction of this committee highlighted in yellow. Our 2025 legislative program builds on our established strategic priorities with an emphasis on securing the necessary legislative authority, funding, political support, and regulatory actions to accomplish our regional priorities in Sacramento and Washington. In preparing this year's program, we've made some small adjustments to better align with anticipated challenges and opportunities that may arise in the coming year. As you can see, the support section of the document is largely the same as last year's program, though we have made minor changes throughout to clarify language, reduce overlap, and add mention of topics likely to require legislative and funding advocacy in the year ahead. In the monitoring section of the program, we've added a new goal to ensure an appropriate level of attention is paid to developments around emerging topics like, or the emerging topic of artificial intelligence. And that's numbered 32, the final bullet. This program outlines the policies and initiatives we are focused on in 2025, and we look forward to working with you to advance these important goals in the months ahead. We ask for the committee's recommendation to advance our 2025 legislative program to the full Board of Directors and would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. So with that, why don't we start with public speakers?
No public comments on this item.
Great. Any board member comments or questions? Ms. Hudson.
Certainly. I also noted that there was language to support efforts to pursue funding at the state and federal levels for the January 22nd, 2024 flooding disaster, and language to support the implementation of policy and funding strategies to address the Tijuana River Valley sewage pollution, which is very important to all of us, as we heard at the board at the last meeting. Thank you for that inclusion.
Thank you. Agreed. Very nice to have those as part of the legislative program and important. Any other member comments? Mayor Duncan.
Thank you. Just really quickly on number 7, I'm reading it. I just want to make sure that I'm not misreading it because I do think funding for micro-mobility projects is a very important goal. And I know we've talked about it in other aspects of SANDAG when we're doing our planning and potential spending. It's interesting. It talks about, public transit and intercity rail, et cetera. And then it says as well as to increase specialized transportation, active transportation, and micro-mobility projects for nonprofit organizations and transit operators. I just wanted to make sure that language wasn't reading to me is limiting it to not including those items for cities, for instance, such as Coronado. Because we're not, I guess you could potentially call us a transit operator in that case if we come up with a micro-mobility program again, because we had a pilot program. We're going to be looking to do that in the future now. But that was just my one clarification. I wanted to just mention.
We could amend to also local
municipalities.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
If you think it's appropriate, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't.
It is appropriate, and we'll be coming back to you in the next month or two with the grant criteria for the flexible fleet funding program, and local jurisdictions, including military institutions, are eligible entities for that funding program. So
Thank you.
reflect that here.
Yeah, I appreciate that as that distinction as well. And I just had one other final comment on the language about the Tijuana River Valley sewage situation. I certainly appreciate that being added as we've discussed, I think here, but definitely at the board level. There is legislation, as you know, SB 10 from Senator Steve Padilla that's pending, and there may be, this is our, legislative policy programs, but there may be opportunities potentially for the board to potentially do a vote of support of a bill or a legislation piece at some point. Which maybe actually be helpful to that type of legislation.
And there's also potential federal legislation to be carried for some operations and maintenance continuing funding. I think it's Senator Congressman Vargas who's trying to carry it, right?
Well, there's 3 or 4 things.
Yeah.
There was the EPA bill that was referred to last year where they might have a supervisory role, and it created I believe $50 million per year for 10 years to help effectuate that. The IBWC is a tiny entity under the State Department. There's a few other bills, but the main maintenance and construction bill is the annual funding of the IBWC's maintenance and construction budget, which is totally separate from the awards for expanding the plant that was contained, for instance, in the FEMA continuing resolution bill at the end of last year, which was the additional $250 million. But yes, that is actually a very important thing. I just met with Congressman Peters on it a week ago, Monday, and that's something to make sure we don't get lost, because there's been a lot of press releases that have come out, and rightfully so to a certain extent, and said, hey, the IBWC has the money to expand the plant. Now, get to it and let's get it done. But the lobbying for that increased funding is super important, because if we build it and don't maintain it, it'll break, just like our plant did and Mexico's plant, to be fair. Just the brief comment of where that is right now. Prior to the end of the last congressional session, when we don't have a 2025 budget yet, we have a continuing resolution. The Senate had passed, I believe, $170 million approximately for the construction and maintenance, and the House had passed about approximately $160 million. So they haven't been reconciled, but compared to 2023, that's like, night and day with the amount of funding for it. So sorry to go off on a ramble, but
Yeah,
you asked me.
We know it's an important issue that we're all behind. So any progress that can be made would be great. Sharon, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to thank SANDAG government relations staff for working with our team on the legislative programs. We have a very good relationship with the SANDAG at North County Transit District, Port, Airport, et cetera. And we're really rowing in the same direction to try to get grants for the region. My one comment is that number 7, we really do need revenue increases for transit throughout the state. We're working with the state CalSTA to try to identify new revenue sources. And as much as micro mobility is a nice to have, when it costs anywhere from $70 to $100 a ride, is that where we want to be focusing our energies to get funding, when we could be cutting, in our budget, 25% of our service? So I hope we can all keep that in mind as we are approaching what has become a very serious crisis for public transportation in the state of California.
Rafael?
I just had a question on number 12. It looks like there's a shift from equity and inclusion efforts that included the digital elimination of the digital divide, and it looks like the digital divide priority fell off and it's a more focus on underserved rural and tribal communities. I'm just wondering, specific to the digital divide part, is that because there's been meaningful progress and it's no longer necessary, or is it a shift in priority?
I think the intention of that change was just to make that item more broad and encompassing. It's not to replace, it's to include and expand beyond that specific sort of element of the consideration.
Thank you.
Did you want to go ahead, John?
Thank you, Hannah and Ryan, for this. Going back to number 7, I think, and if this is, sorry, going back to number 7, and if this is encompassed somewhere else, apologies. I think there could be some value in SANDAG supporting opportunities for transit agencies so obviously we'd love the state to fund the system completely. That'd be lovely. But to the extent that they won't do that, it would also be nice for the agencies to have more flexibility to pursue revenue. And so I brought up some potential opportunities to make relatively modest changes. I think appear to be relatively modest changes to state legislation that already exists that might make it easier for our transit agencies to raise revenue. And it would be great to have SANDAG support in those efforts. So I don't know if that needs to be an amendment or if we can just kind of provide that recommendation here, and then it hopefully could be incorporated when it's brought to the full board.
I guess for clarity, do we feel it's not captured in the current language? I mean, the point is real, but just from the perspective, it's being, advocating for sustainable funding for public transit could be regardless of the funding method or source, right?
As long as there's clarity from the agency that if we see, if there is a policy proposal moving at the state level, that would make it easier for transit agencies to raise revenue, that SANDAG would then throw its support behind it.
If I might clarify, it would be, for instance, how AB 805 authorized the transit agencies in their own service area to go for a ballot measure. Would that be something that this legislative program would allow SANDAG staff to support?
I think that the support for that type of a measure will be the board, right? That's the ultimate decision maker on any like proposed legislation or proposition for tax increases. But from this program is what our GR team is going in hunting for, and on grants, on legislations and things like that. And I think this is inclusive of trying to look for money for both the capital and the sustainability of the programs. I do think that's already included there. Now, measure, that's, I think, something that the board has to weigh in. Yeah.
Well, the measure itself, right?
Yes.
But the policy change to allow for the measure, that's what we're talking about. And Sharon, that was a perfect example, right? AB 805, look, SANDAG as a complicated region, finding the, getting everyone on the same page is difficult. The MTS service area is pretty unequivocal, it seemed, at least from the results of the last election, in terms of its support for raising revenue to provide for the system. Continuing to provide opportunities for the transit agencies to provide the residents in their service areas with an opportunity to fund the system that they want, seems like an important way to make sure that we as a region can continue to move toward our goals. So recognizing that if a specific measure were to come in front of us, obviously the board would need to make a decision on that independently. But it does feel important for there to be some level of clarity about the agency's ability to weigh in on this agency's ability to weigh in. on whether or not it's supportive of transit agencies having more flexibility to pursue revenue, similar to AB 805. So expanding beyond what's currently in AB 805 to other potential sources of revenue.
You get comment, Chair?
Yeah, go ahead. Mayor Duncan.
So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm looking, saying this is our legislative and policy program. So for number 7, I mean, obviously I know you saw it, but it states capital and flexible sustaining operations funding for public transit. So if there was somewhere in there clarification or word that, because it's broad to me, that it's sustaining, it's flexible, and it's capital. If it's something about, revenue, or maybe, or somewhere to put something about, yeah, I think that's pretty broad is my reading of it.
Yeah, I guess to drive it home, Mario, you or staff can answer this. I mean, for example, if there was an opportunity to have, given the way number 7 is written right now, if there's an opportunity at the state level to advocate for a change that might make it easier for MTS or NCTD to propose something that would potentially increase revenue, we would advocate for that, correct?
Yeah, we're all supportive of
Yeah.
getting the capital projects and understanding that the capital projects require sustainability by all means, right? Why do we pursue more things if we can't even sustain the existing ones?
Yeah, so unless you're very uncomfortable, I'm
No,
inclined to
as
leave the
long as,
language
yeah,
it is because
I'm all good as long
if
as
we
there's clarity
yeah,
here.
okay,
I'm
great,
good, yeah.
perfect, thanks.
I also want to note that item 21, that we support transit boards legislative programs were consistent with SANDAG policy may also cover some of the efforts we're talking about right now.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Seeing no other comment, I'd entertain a motion to move this item forward, inclusive of the change proposed by Mayor Duggan to advocate for cities and other organizations to get micromobility funding.
So moved.
Moved by Sean, second by Edson. Can everybody please vote?
A motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you, guys. We'll now move on to item number 5, which is the Regional Climate Action Planning updates. We'll have Susan, Samaya, and Natasha giving these updates.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Susan Friedman, and I'm here with my colleagues, Samaya Elder and Natasha Dulick. And we're going to go over a regional climate action planning effort that we're undertaking. And this is being done hand in hand with your local government staff. We're coordinating a lot with them as well as other groups in the region. This is part of a EPA-funded grant that's gone out to major metropolitan areas across the country as well as to states to really take a look at how do we work together to reduce climate pollution. So we're working on a regional climate action roadmap. And what that does is builds on the local adopted climate action plans that you all have. And then sees what at scale regionally could be worthwhile to do, and then how can we bring resources to the region to enact those things. So I've got the team here to go over the measures. We've been to the Sustainable Communities Working Group, the Mobility Working Group, and the Social Equity Working Group in January to really find out, hey, get input on these measures and actions to reduce climate emissions. And so we'd love to get any direction from you all today as well. And that's what Samaya and Natasha are going to walk through today. So thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Susan. So on our agenda today, as she mentioned, is we'll be providing an update on the progress we've made on our EPA grant, which is referred to as the Regional Climate Action Roadmap. Then we'll go into how we created the greenhouse gas reduction measures that we will be sharing a little bit later on, as well as concluding with some next steps. So to provide some background on the roadmap that we're talking about, back in September of 2023, SANDAG received a planning grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, which has supported the development of this roadmap, as well as the other 2 deliverables listed here. You may recall the Priority Climate Action Plan, which was completed in March of last year, and the status report to be completed in a couple of years. The roadmap will serve as a comprehensive regional vision to support collaboration to combat climate change. So to echo Susan, I really want to highlight that this means it's not just things that SANDAG can do, but is rather a shared vision of what many different agencies and organizations across the region could do to combat climate change. The roadmap will include an updated regional greenhouse gas inventory, regional greenhouse gas projections out through 2050, and then economy-wide greenhouse gas reduction targets that align with our state goals. It also includes, as Susan mentioned again, measures and actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from 7 sectors across the economy. They're going to be listed on this slide here. And we'll hear more about those in just a minute. And then lastly, the roadmap will also be looking at benefits to environmental justice communities, reductions in air pollution that would occur if these measures and actions were implemented, and lastly, anticipated workforce needs to accomplish this roadmap. Now that you've heard a little bit about the contents of the roadmap, we're going to delve into the process we went through to create the measures that we're sharing today. So through all the activities that I'm about to walk through on this slide, we've been collaborating very closely with the sustainability and climate staff at each of your jurisdictions, along with those at other public agencies and similar types of organizations. So starting here at the top of the slide, back in July of 2024, we hosted a regional climate table workshop, which included representation from local jurisdictions, public agencies, environmental groups, CBOs, tribes, really diverse group of stakeholders to hear their ideas for potential greenhouse gas measures and gather ideas for initial climate priorities. We then spent the next several months compiling and assessing that information that we had received and conducting additional research. And then in October, in October of last year, we had meetings with technical stakeholders to help us further develop those initial ideas that we had heard. And then we also, these last 3 items here, have numerous ongoing activities that are helping us get feedback on measures and climate priorities. So these have included interagency meetings with local government climate staff, as I mentioned. We also have partnerships with CBOs in the region to help us do community outreach and get public input. And then lastly, we're of course doing other forms of engagement, such as presentations like the one today. So with that in mind, we'll move on to our draft measures. So just to kind of tee it up for Natasha in a moment, the measures themselves are comprehensive. They include objectives and supporting actions that we'll be touching on today. But we also encourage you to read through them in the agenda packet, which starts on page 33, I believe. I also want to acknowledge again that these are drafts and we're here today seeking additional feedback. So we're looking forward to your comments at the end. And then lastly, just to restate again, because this is really a key component of this roadmap, it is a regional vision for collaborative climate action, meaning the types of measures listed for each sector that we're about to go through will not all be implemented by SANDAG. Rather, it's a shared vision for what lots of different groups could do. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Natasha.
Thanks, Maya. So like she said, I'm going to dive into the sectors now and their accompanying measures. So starting with transportation, these measures are including continuing and growing many of the key projects and programs that are already underway in the region. So this would include increasing public transit use, expanding active transportation, expanding flexible fleet services, including neighborhood electric vehicles and micromobility, continuing and expanding transportation demand management programs to reduce VMT, increasing the adoption of zero-emission vehicles, so passenger vehicles, trucks, and buses. And then lastly, reducing fuel use from idling vehicles, thinking about like roundabouts and curb management strategies. This next slide, we cover 2 sectors. So just to note, the sectors are color-coded and the icons are in the right corner in case you get confused. So the first we have for electricity, we have the one measure in blue, which is to decarbonize the regional electric grid. So this would look like increasing participation in fully renewable electricity options, as well as increasing the generation of distributed renewable energy throughout the region. And then for our building sector in gray, we have 2 measures. The first to increase the electrification of buildings, and then increase the energy efficiency of buildings for those that are already electrified. And for both of these building measures, we would be looking at municipal, residential, and then non-residential and commercial buildings. Next up, we have another two sectors. So first, we'll start with natural and working lands. This is the top three in green. And these are specifically looking at conserving and preserving our existing ecosystems in the region and actions that would act to capture carbon and act as sinks. So these measures include conserve marine and wetland ecosystems, conserve forest, shrublands, and chaparral ecosystems, and then increase our urban canopy cover. And then the next sector here is waste and materials management, the bottom three in pink. And these three measures are seeking to limit waste and just reduce emissions overall from operations in the region. So these measures would include diverting waste from landfills, including organic waste, and also waste from construction and demolition projects. Reduce landfill emissions through increased methane capture at landfills. And then lastly, reduce emissions from water and wastewater treatment facilities in the region. And this slide has our last two sectors, agriculture and industry. Starting with agriculture, we have the four here in orange, and these are looking at best practices to reduce emissions and expand or conserve ag lands. So first we have reduce agricultural operations emissions, looking at equipment and just more efficient options, conserve agricultural lands, expand urban farming in the region, including community gardens, and then lastly, manage soil health to sequester carbon, so improving overall soil management practices. And then our last sector is industry on the right, and we have two measures here. And while we don't have a huge industry sector here in San Diego, it's still important to note that there's ways to reduce emissions here. So the first would be to reduce energy intensity of industrial facilities, so focusing on overall industrial energy efficiency at facilities. And then lastly, to reduce fugitive and short-lived climate pollutants and emissions. And if you don't know, fugitive emissions are those that are unintentionally released, such as gases or vapors at facilities or through equipment. So that wraps up our 7 sectors and their measures in the roadmap. So looking ahead now to some next steps. We will be continuing to refine these draft measures and their supporting actions with the feedback that we've collected at the working groups that Samaya and Susan had mentioned. We've talked to a lot of your staff and gotten feedback. So we'll be continuing to work with our consultant, USD EPIC, to quantify the emissions reductions from the measures once they're finalized. And then for additional outreach, we will be hosting another climate table next week, actually, to review measures and get some more in-person feedback. And then we'll be releasing a public survey as well soon. And then in addition to the measures that we're working on, we are working with EPIC to complete our updated regional GHG inventory and look to come or have that ready by the spring. And lastly, we are aiming to push out the roadmap, the draft roadmap, and host another climate table this summer. So we'll look forward to coming back to you with milestone updates along the way. So that's it for us. We'd love to hear your comments and feedback. Our information is up here if you ever want to reach out, but really appreciate your time and look forward to your input.
Thank you all. Francesca, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not have public comment.
Okay. Committee members, any comments or questions? Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you for the work on this. You mentioned that there will be some metrics attached to this later on, meaning targets or reasonable expectations for how much reduction in carbon emissions we'd have. What sort of metrics should we expect?
So with the plan, we're going to have a forecast out to 2050, and then we're going to have economy-wide GHG reduction targets. We're going to be aligning that with state laws to see if we're consistent with that. And we've been talking to everybody about their local climate action plans as well. So that'll be in a methodology report that'll be coming out with the draft plan.
Got it. And do you anticipate that the type of emissions will be kind of broken down in a way that takes into consideration, which emissions accelerate climate change the most and which ones are, not great, but, maybe a little less impactful? Methane is an example, right? Is something we want to reduce to the greatest extent possible.
Well, EPA has really directed us to take a look at, what are the heaviest hitters and see what we can, low hanging fruit and whatnot, and see what we can really make a big difference on regionally. So yeah, we're going to quantify everything we can through the project and then work on whether it's SANDAG or what other agencies can then work on implementing reductions.
Got it. So I guess the heavy hitter, that's kind of what I mean. Like we could define heavy hitters different ways. So something that's more potent, but isn't necessarily produced at the same volume, or is that considered a heavy hitter? Or not? I'm just kind of trying to get a sense of what it is that we're going to lift up.
Well, we've got the draft measures and the actions that list that they're the types of programs that would reduce emissions. What we have is the University of San Diego's Energy Policy Initiative Center is right now preparing the greenhouse gas inventory, and they're doing the quantifications for us. So we don't have them here today,
Right.
but we can certainly follow up with feedback on if you're looking for something in particular.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm hoping is that this is useful. It's interesting, and I think it's like valuable for someone to learn from. What I think is, when I say useful, I mean like from an action standpoint so that the cities, municipalities within the region can take this and turn it into action. Obviously, we've got our climate action plans at the local level as well, but I'm just kind of trying to understand to what extent this can be a value add to that. And I'll just speak from the city of San Diego's perspective. We have an updated cap, and we're not making progress in the way that I think we need to. And one of the reasons for that is we've got a huge tranche of carbon emissions that we are aiming to reduce through our built environment and doing nothing to actually reduce that. What would be helpful for me as a policymaker is to then be able to look at other resources to figure out, okay, if we're not making progress there, what are the other levers that we can pull in order to still get as close to our goals as possible, if not achieve them completely. So, and one of the ways that we might be able to do that is to understand where the greatest bang for buck there is, for, again, not just reducing emissions, but reducing the most harmful emissions. Does that make sense at all? Because this isn't a binding document for any of us, right?
Right. No,
So-
it's a vision, and we are working with your staff. And so we're looking at things, it can even be with incentive programs that maybe work more effectively and cheaper, that is at a regional scale versus a local scale. And model ordinances that could be used for multiple governments instead of one government. So we're listening to what your staff's telling us too. That's important.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the objectives themselves are great, and the supporting actions all sound great. I think, again, in order to make it as useful as possible from my perspective, what would be really good to know is what are the easiest things to level up on, and how to level up on those things. At that point, to me, this becomes like a real resource that could be of great value, as some cities make more or less progress on their climate action plans. I certainly would welcome any resource that's produced here at the local level that makes it easier for us to pivot off the direction that we're headed and toward one where we're actually moving toward reaching the goals that we've set in our cap. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually want to riff off a little bit because the questions I had when I first saw this, I took it from the perspective of where I've encountered this before, which is in my own municipality, which is we have a climate action plan. It has steps in there, it has measures in there, and has goals, and we're accountable for that, right? So we're expected to hit those. And so I was like, okay, this is what SANDAG is going to be able to do. These are the steps that we're going to take. These are what we're going to measure. These are our goals, and we'll be accountable. But that's not what I'm hearing right now. And I'm wondering, because I mean, at least at the start of the presentation, you mentioned that not all of these apply because we don't have all of these things, and they may be useful elsewhere. So maybe you could, talk a little bit about how this document would be used, as well as can we take a subset of these and say we're actually as SANDAG going to commit to this and be accountable for these reductions ourselves? Is that something that's part of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I think the part of the grant is because California is pretty unique. You know, there are a lot of locally adopted climate action plans here, where that's not really the case in a lot of other parts of the country. But yeah, so we're looking at how do we enhance collaboration and coordination at the regional level, as well as coordinating with the state on reducing emissions. We are looking at, say, in the transportation sector, what we want to quantify as GHG reduction measures that go above and beyond the regional plan that could go into the environmental impact report for the 2025 regional plan. So we are looking to use the document in some ways to help inform that effort. We're also looking at if we can inform accessing resources from federal or state to bring more things to the region to reduce emissions. So it's not the same as a regular cap. It's a little different. It's more visionary is the idea, and the idea of how to work together and where can we fill gaps at a regional level that maybe can't happen jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
I just want to add one additional thing to Susan's comments, and things are changing in real time at the federal level. But back when we applied for this grant, it was a requirement to develop the regional cap to be eligible for some significant pots of funding from the EPA. And so one of the primary reasons that we applied for this grant and took the lead on the regional cap was to make us and all of the other jurisdictions in the region eligible to be able to apply for these funding programs. So I don't know if those funding programs will continue in the future, but we will have a regional cap in the event that they are.
Thanks. Yeah, that's very helpful from a tactical perspective and understanding it. I guess one last question in this space, how does that then interact with the regional aspects that are in the county's climate action plan? So they have a lot of regional goals in their climate action plan as well. Or is it collaborative, leveraged, or just two totally different documents?
No, we're working with county staff as well, and the county's climate action plan is for the unincorporated area, whereas the SANDAG plan is for region-wide. So it really is building on the efforts of everyone in the region to see what we can do at this scale in addition to locally.
Okay. Yeah, Jennifer.
Yeah, this is great, but there's a couple things that I think I don't know if it's appropriate to add them or not. I think roundabouts are wonderful in the correct spot. So what are you doing to sort of figure out which places seem to be roundabouts can be in the wrong places too and cause more trouble than they're worth. And then curb management strategies that reduce idling. I think we need to focus on like fast food drive-throughs, fast food restaurants. What are some strategies that we can do to reduce the proliferation of drive-throughs? I'd like to get rid of all fast food restaurants too, but just the drive-through aspect. And then in the agricultural section, this doesn't really pertain to San Diego County because we don't have any like large meat processing plants or cattle ranches or things of that nature. But just overall, we can't make everybody become vegetarian in a perfect world or vegan, but just things like encouraging less reliance on meat products in general, or just mention it somewhere that would be a goal also, like, meatless Mondays, or just, eat meat once a week or something. And then the final thing is, I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see anything under the VMT reduction about encouraging carpooling by having more carpool lanes, not managed lanes that people can pay to drive in, because that does not encourage carpooling. We need more carpooling incentive, more of an incentive for two people to ride together, like you guys are driving home together today. So that, those are just my thoughts, or suggestions going forward.
Thank you. Esther.
Thank you. What I'm hoping, where our city is, City of Oceanside is applying for a grant to do a master plan. We haven't had one updated in a while for pedestrian and bike. And so I think I see that you have under expand active transportation, bike lanes, especially now that we're in this age of e-bikes and kids using them for school. I think I'd like to have that included in that discussion and support for it. Thank you.
I'll just take advantage of the opportunity to plug the Smart Growth Incentive Program, which is out right now, and projects like that are eligible. So encourage your jurisdiction to submit an application.
Thanks for the response. Anybody else? Seeing no one, we will thank you again. Nice information. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 6, which is the San Ysidro Mobility Hub update. And Zach Hernandez and Lizzie Javi.
Thank you, Chair Zito. Thanks to the Transportation Committee for having us. Again, Zach Hernandez, planner here at SANDAG, my colleague Lizzie Javi. Here to present a couple updates on multiple efforts that all kind of share a common goal or a common thread of improving, how we serve our South Bay, our border, and our cross-border communities better with mobility and transportation, of course, but also improving the urban context and land uses around key stations to maximize community benefit. But just starting with the work that we're preparing for to see some changes at the San Ysidro station, I'll start with just throwing a couple of numbers at you. The first being 90,000. So there's, on any given day, 90,000 people crossing just northbound through the San Ysidro port of entry alone. Keep in mind, there's other ports of entry too, but that's just San Ysidro on its own. For context, Petco Park's max capacity is just a little shy of 45,000. So if you can envision, 2 sold-out Padre games every single day, that's the volume that port of entry is facilitating. So it's really massive. 20,000 out of those 90,000 who are crossing are doing so on foot as pedestrians. 14,000 of them using transit, primarily the Blue Line. And since 1981, when the Blue Line first started running, San Ysidro's been the anchor and still kind of is the anchor for the regional transit system, but you wouldn't guess that by seeing the condition that it's in or how it's configured. Today it continues to be that workhorse, as we know, but despite a lot of limiting factors, which we'll get into now. I think the way to describe, or the words that I use to describe the experience out there at the station include hectic. I think chaotic is fair to say sometimes. Definitely very, very busy. Physically speaking, the station is incredibly small for the amount of demand that it's facilitating. And then add to that the configuration, the layout of the infrastructure itself. You have a very tangled station with infrastructure that's kind of tripping over itself. A lot of modes crisscrossing, pedestrians try to navigate the situation. It could get very, very hectic, very chaotic. Add to that there's a lot of physical disconnects. And you can tell when you're out there that the station wasn't really built to handle the foot traffic that it currently does. And the connections to and from the station weren't really designed at a human scale. But one of the biggest deficiencies is that there's no room for more transit service. And to this day, it's still just the Blue Line, which operates out of the station, and a local bus route, 906, 907, that circulates around the community. Keep in mind, there's the other 70,000 people who are crossing northbound that are doing so in their personal vehicles in the long wait times and contributing to the poor air quality. They're doing so because the Blue Line and the local bus route simply aren't an option for them. And so while we have a responsibility to plan for the long term, we also have an existing system that needs improvements and upgrades. So with that in mind, over the last couple of years, SANDAG, MTS, City of San Diego, and Caltrans worked together to plan for more near-term improvements to the existing San Ysidro station. So through lots of brainstorming sessions, stakeholder meetings, gathering community input, and importantly, talking to station users, we developed some scenarios for how to get more life, more function out of this important station. What we came up with essentially were some station redesign concepts, all that provide, better human scale connectivity, more physical capacity for transit, all while trying to accommodate the needs, the requirements of CBP and Homeland Security that have operations happening, through and around the station, and also trying to keep impacts to private property minimal where feasible. So the three scenarios, concepts A, B, and C, all achieve the things that you see on screen, just in slightly different ways. And we don't have time to dive into each and every one and all the elements of them, but I think the big takeaway is that the study demonstrated that there are ways to improve the station sooner rather than later, as long as you're willing to move some things around. And by that I mean, even just shifting or thinking about shifting where the trolley platforms are by a couple 100 feet is a way to, really unlock a lot of much needed space and provide really significant connectivity benefits. So this next clip kind of shows where we are today and what it might look like with these upgrades. So while we advance those things in the near term, we also know there's a need for a comprehensive vision, not just for transportation, but also potential development in and around what is already a major hub, despite a lot of the issues out there. But what really should be a major flagship station that's thought of, equally as a great public space and a great station. So that's where the San Ysidro Mobility Hub work really comes into play. And looking towards that longer term future, we know there's a possibility for even more transit connections to connect at San Ysidro, some of which are in or soon will be in the early planning stages, and you'll hear more about. But in addition to the functional aspects, the rail and the bus connections and the way people will get to and from those things, the future mobility hub is going to need a design scheme that is responsive to and reflective of the binational community that uses this space, tapping into also the creativity that we have here in San Diego and Tijuana, and also a development strategy that includes creative ways to integrate and to capitalize on and leverage some development opportunities that we know will come with a bigger, more long-term investment in the station. And as we advance, the near-term work beyond the concept planning that I just kind of showed on screen and start some of the preliminary engineering for that, later this year, we're also going to be starting the planning and community visioning process to inform the long-term components as well. These two things are going to be complementing each other. So think, a phase one or a phase two of one project, or think Russian nesting doll when you look at this screen. But one important aspect that I've been hinting at is a need for some comprehensive strategies around all this work, one that includes not just the transportation components, but captures the full benefits of a better station by complementing it with the land use improvements. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Lizzie to talk about another study that's helping us understand that side better.
Thanks, Zach. The Blue Line Transit-Oriented Development Study is building off near-term infrastructure investments while providing a case study for TOD opportunities along the Blue Line trolley. The study informs the long-term vision of the San Ysidro Mobility Hub, helping shape land use considerations, working alongside our stakeholders and cities. Not wanting to plan for transportation projects in a silo, the goal of the study is to plan holistically to maximize benefits of transportation investments through complementary land use strategies. The Blue Line Transit-Oriented Development Study, or Blue Line TOD study, identifies opportunities for encouraging and creating TOD at and near two Blue Line trolley stations in South County, the San Ysidro Station in the city of San Diego and the Palomar Transit Center in the city of Chula Vista. You'll see examples for both stations throughout the presentation, but the same analysis was completed for each station. The study assesses land use, transportation, and market conditions to inform strategies for TOD implementation that highlight opportunities for potential development, community integration, and mobility improvements. Throughout the study, we worked closely with stakeholders at the City of San Diego, City of Chula Vista, MTS, and conducted outreach throughout the study, working alongside a community-based organization. We're making recommendations to the cities and MTS for proposed improvements to the public realm, land use updates, and policy considerations. Today, I'll be providing an overview going over the process and key takeaways of the study as we're set up to wrap up the final report. So for example, the Palomar Transit Center has high ridership numbers, vacant lots, and surface parking surrounded by commercial and residential land uses. SANDAG is currently planning and in design phases for a number of investments, including a trolley grade separation project and a rapid bus connecting Chula Vista to San Diego State University. Understanding these upcoming investments for Palomar, as well as those for San Ysidro, one of our key takeaways include making recommendations to maximize benefits by leveraging public investment for land use potential and capital improvement projects through informed TOD strategies. Early on in the study, for example, we looked at how the land is utilized compared to current zoning regulations. So what you see on a scale from dark green to red is that green areas have more capacity to support a greater density than current conditions. We set out to analyze why and make corresponding recommendations. With initial analysis complete, we then set out to measure opportunity for TOD potential to help us inform our overall report and implementation strategies. While SANDAG doesn't have land use authority, we're working closely with our stakeholders, again, to provide these recommendations and resources. So this task included utilizing a TOD index with scores for categories for transit connectivity, walkability, bikeability, development feasibility, and community health and well-being, as well as corresponding subcategories. This provides a score at the parcel level to analyze TOD potential. The next steps of the study included outlining specific recommendations for implementation strategies. Here's the slide demonstrating opportunities in San Ysidro to leverage publicly owned land to help meet our regional housing goals, while also uplifting other placemaking strategies for land use development. What we learned in this task and throughout our market analysis is that while we prepare or wait for the market to catch up, public agencies can invest in affordable housing, station, and public realm improvements at large. I would like to emphasize this study helps make recommendations in line with our public outreach, engagement with the business communities of those areas, and in coordination with our cities. The study is exploratory in nature, demonstrating process of identifying potential for TOD with complementary mobility improvements. For example, the rendering you see is a concept, highlighting the highest and best use of the area, but essentially is prototypical. However, the market analysis completed for the study can be scaled and applied throughout the study area and the sub-regional level. So some next steps include collaborating with stakeholders like city staff and affordable housing developers, leveraging the study for the San Ysidro Mobility Hub planning work, and further evaluating options for housing as an opportunity for transportation project mitigation and exploring innovative project delivery models and financing mechanisms at the federal, state, and local level. And what that means is how can we build transportation projects and utilize or leverage different funding sources to build more housing options at the same time. So to zoom out again and speak to the different work happening specifically around the San Ysidro Transit Center, here's a timeline of events highlighting the 3 different but intertwined efforts. So starting with the near-term improvements, so the San Ysidro Transit Center study concluded just in 2024, and then we'll be moving and have resources to move forward some of the near-term improvements into the next phase of design and environmental. And in the long-term vision, the Blue Line TOD study really kicks off the San Ysidro Mobility Hub work, again, speaking to the long-term vision of the Mobility Hub and surrounding area. In 2026, there'll be draft Mobility Hub and land use development concepts, and in 2027, the planning study would conclude. And with that, we welcome any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you both for the presentation. Francesca, do we have any public speakers?
Do not have any public speakers.
Any comments from committee members? Ms. Edson.
I just wanted to thank you for the report. It was very thorough and informative. Also, I did kind of have a clarifying question. So the staff report says that the crossing is one of the busiest border crossings in the world, with over 90,000 people crossing northbound each day. But in the presentation, Zach, I think you mentioned also 70,000 vehicles. Is that in addition to the 90,000?
No, out of the 90,000 who cross, that's the total number of individuals. 70,000 individuals are doing so in personal vehicles, the other 20 crossing on foot as pedestrians.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I guess I'll put on my Miss Mendoza hat and just confirm there aren't any drive-through fast food restaurants as part of this mobility hub plan, correct?
Ironically, there's one out there now, the Jack in the Box.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It's the perfect implementation.
But no new ones in the new design, no,
Okay.
no drive-throughs.
Should include e-bikes too.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. It looks like a very exciting development proposal for me as well, to me as well. I hope we can do stuff like that and continue to do it throughout the whole county. With that, our next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, February 21st at 9 a.m. Please note, this is the joint meeting with Regional Planning and Borders and will be held at the Old Town office of Caltrans.
Is he gonna be here?
No, Old Town office at Caltrans.
Caltrans, yeah.
You'll get some information about.
The
that
agenda's
agreement.
not out yet for that.
The agenda is not out yet. So it should be out next week, but
Yeah.
it'll be at we were there a couple years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's at the Caltrans facility down by Old Town.
Yeah, and will be our host there. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
And it's going to be our host.
And we'll be the host.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ann.
Two of them, yeah.
We're adjourned.